Hello and welcome back. I'm Yogi Doug Johnson, and today I'd like to give a talk about intention. And before I do that, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon and everyone who's supported me and my content through PayPal and Venmo. You make these talks possible, so thank you very much. Okay, so today's talk is about intention. Intention is everything. Intention is the most important thing. It's the only thing. Okay, so intention, our own intention, and the intention of others. So if you have followed my teaching for a while, then you know that I tell you that this teaching is really about your own heart and mind. It's about what's going on inside of you. We don't really have control over the outside world, not in a direct way. We can try and influence others through, force, violence, threats, emotional blackmail. And this is what most people do. They don't think that they're doing this, but this is exactly what they're doing. They're trying to arrange the outside world, the physical world, in a way that it makes them feel peaceful and happy. So they try and tell people, when you say this, it upsets me, so stop saying this. When you do this, it upsets me, so stop doing that. And usually those who are closest to us, our loved ones, they're the ones that we try and train the most. But that's just essentially what we're doing, is we're just essentially trying to train them to avoid our triggers, what are called our triggers. And if you're not sure what a trigger is, I gave a brief talk in the past about triggers. I might do another one again, update that. But basically a trigger is something that upsets you. A lot of us think that our triggers are somehow universal, or that everyone else should know what our triggers are, or even if they don't know, that we should tell them, and then once we tell them, they should know to avoid our triggers. But in reality, it's not really how things work. Usually our triggers are highly personal, and they are based on how we feel, on our emotions. And generally speaking, they are circumstances that elicit something from the past that was uncomfortable or difficult or is unprocessed for us. So someone might say something, and then we feel insecure, or we feel angry, or we feel slighted in some way. Now, the average person thinks that the other person did something wrong. Okay, this is the common way of looking at things. You hurt my feelings, you did something wrong, you need to apologize. This is not how we want to look at it. Okay, if you're a student of mine, if you're following my teaching and you're understanding what I'm saying, then this is a very, very important point. You need to change this in your own mind. It's not another person's responsibility or job not to trigger you. It is ideally your job to eliminate your triggers. When we begin to awaken spiritually and we realize our true nature, as I said in my last talk, we realize that our true nature is just this open, spacious awareness, that objects and feelings and thoughts arise within it. And ultimately, it's a loving awareness. It's in love with form, and form is not different than what it is. And so in the Buddhist tradition, this is expressed as form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Feeling, thought, impulse, and consciousness are likewise emptiness. So we realize that we are this emptiness. We are this meditative space of awareness. And again, it's very often called the loving space of awareness, because when we really realize this, not intellectually, it's very important. It's not a, oh, I get it, or I see it, or I can understand, right? It's a seeing, a direct seeing into the nature of the self, which is the nature of all things, the nature of reality. So when we see this, we see very clearly that these, again, feelings, thoughts, impulses, everything is just arising within this space of awareness. So it's a clear space of awareness. And even our emotions, even things like getting upset or getting angry, whatever, these also arise within this space. Now, there isn't really a problem as long as everything is allowed to flow. I even want to go so far as to say that even things like anger may be appropriate in certain circumstances if they are free of judgment and condemnation and attachment. So if you look at an animal or animals, the way they act, Eckhart Tolle talks a little bit about this. Like, he used to watch the ducks in a pond. And so he would see sometimes two ducks and maybe they get too close or whatever it is. Maybe one is chasing another's mate. I don't know why ducks fight. But he said that the ducks would have a little skirmish and then they would separate and they would shake, and that they would dissipate the energy, that anger, and then everything was fine. So this is what we humans don't do. This is what we humans are horrible at. And we tend to hold on to the feelings, and we create a story about the other person, and we condemn the other person, we judge the other person just because we got upset. So one expression that can be used is burning clean, that something may arise, okay, anger, upset, and again, it may actually be necessary for survival in certain instances. I need to be careful about saying this, because I think then people are going to justify a lot of unenlightened behavior and say, well, it's justified. But when you're awake, you're sometimes surprised by the way awakeness expresses itself. It can be surprising. And at least my experience of it is it can express as anger. It can express in a very dynamic way. And an example I give of this is Jesus turning over the money changers' tables in the temple. So this is a very seemingly violent act, very passionate, angry, but there was awakeness was moving into the world. It was trying to make a point through Jesus. That's the way I see it. You could say God or Spirit was moving him. And so while we love to think of spiritual people as quiet and peaceful and maybe talking in hushed tones all the time, this is how many yoga teachers sort of try and present themselves. I'm not sure that enlightenment always expresses that way. I think some people, like Eckhart Tolle, maybe matches that idea we have of spirituality, and he's a very popular spiritual teacher as a result. But I don't know or think that that's the only way that awakeness needs to express itself. So awakeness, spirit, can be very dynamic. And again, it can even show up in an impassioned, angry way, you might say, at times. So what's important is that that flow is there and that there isn't a stickiness there. The stickiness, again, is this idea that we've been affronted. And in A Course in Miracles, it draws a distinction between error, which is a mistake, and sin, which carries this sort of weight of judgment with it. And I think that's a good distinction to make, and I might give a talk on that at another time. But basically, when someone makes a mistake, when they step on our toes, so to speak. They trigger us. What is their, again, intention? Very often, if we pay attention, we will find that people are not intending to upset us. It was not their intention to slight us, to belittle us, to hurt us in any way. And so to then hold a grudge, get upset, demand an apology, any of these things are really problematic for us if that's what we're doing. Now, more important than other people's intention, and ultimately you don't know another person's intention. I'm going to repeat that because a lot of times our mind loves to tell us we know what other people are thinking, right? And it can seem like that. Body language, what was said, the way it was said, intonation. A lot of times our mind just assumes we know. Okay? I'll repeat it. You don't know what another person's intention is. In fact, they may not even know. But you definitely don't know. You might have an assumption. You might assume you know. You might think you know. You don't know. Okay? I don't care who you are. I don't care how clever you are, how smart you are. Even when people tell you what they think their intention is, sometimes that's not true. Okay? So this is a fact, this isn't my opinion, this is a fact. You don't know what another person's intention is, ever. Okay? So we have a choice on the spiritual path. We can assume, and we can assume good or bad. Because it's an assumption either way. Do you understand? You never know what another person's intention was. And so you can assume good or bad because it's always an assumption. So what we want to do is start choosing the good. We want to assume the best in everyone and in every circumstance. So someone says something that belittles us, it hurts our feelings, whatever it is, we want to try and assume the best in them. We want to try and see the best. And this is a very challenging spiritual practice, believe me, because I practice it all the time. It is very difficult because our ego and the world at large generally presents itself as us against them. And we feel attacked, we feel belittled, we feel disrespected, all of the above. And it seems really real. It really seems like there is not another way to see it. A great teacher who can help you work on this is a teacher named Byron Katie. And she does a lot of work around assumptions and thoughts. And she has a worksheet that you can download for free, and it's called the Judge Your Neighbor Worksheet, because that's what we all want to do. We all want to judge our neighbor, and we all want our neighbor to come up wanting. This is one of the reasons why I love Jesus' teaching. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. This is such a powerful teaching, because we so are ready to condemn the other, but we don't reflect on when we have done the exact same thing or even worse in the past. And if we're really honest and we really look, we find that everything we want to condemn another for, we have done it. We have done it, and oftentimes we've done it worse than what we're ready to condemn another person for. Okay, so this is a really important thing. Again, being able to self-reflect, being able to introspect, very, very important. So intention, we don't know intentions of others. We might jump to a conclusion, an assumption, but another teaching I really like is the 4 agreements, and one of the 4 agreements is Don't make assumptions. This is very, very important. So we have to recognize you're not a mind reader. You are not a mind reader. So we do not know another person's intention. We just have to admit that. So what about instances where it seems like it's very overt? You know, where someone seems clearly like they're trying to hurt us, and it seems or feels like there's no way to give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, again, I'll turn to Jesus' teaching. He said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." So this is a very important teaching once again. People will attack us. They will have the intention to hurt us. This does just happen. Again, we don't necessarily know. Again, I would be very careful about ever assuming that you know that this is what someone is intending to do. But there will be instances where it just seems like there's no other interpretation that you can give. And so in those instances, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, what does this really mean? Well, what is really happening is they don't realize it, but they're hurting themselves. We can only hurt ourselves by hurting others. This is, again, an inner truth. So externally, sure, I can do something violent to somebody. I can hurt someone physically, and it doesn't hurt me physically. But what it's hurting is it's hurting me inside. It's hurting my mind and my heart. And it is hurting me, you might say, spiritually. And I'm not even talking about ideas like karma, like, oh, you're going to pay a price in the future. I think you pay the price right then and there. And you pay the price moment by moment. So again, having that much hatred and malice, doing violence to another with the intention to harm and to hurt them, even thinking that there is another, these are all harmful to oneself. So when someone is doing that, they see you as the other, and they want to tear you down, they want to attack you, they want to hurt you. What you can do as somebody on this path is forgive them. And true forgiveness is realizing that there really isn't anything to forgive. That everything that seems like an affront is ultimately a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. Both in the person thinking that they needed to do that, but also in the ultimate sense that really this reality that we're experiencing is almost like a dream. In a sense, it's not really real. Everything is shifting and changing and moving, and we humans ascribe a lot of weight to things, objects, and also events. And so we like to think that there's good and bad, and there's right and wrong. And if we've been wronged, then at another point, that wrong is going to be righted, right? This is the idea of scales of justice, like somehow that we can, if there was a wrong here, that we can find another action and we can even that out. My experience is that this doesn't really exist. This may be an important concept socially among human beings. In other words, that if we didn't have this concept, we may not be able to have complex societies. That we may be too busy robbing and stealing and raping and pillaging one another in order to actually work together. So maybe an important concept on a social level. But I want to remind everybody that, at least as far as I'm concerned, spirituality and the social concerns are separate. And this is a big difference between spirituality, true spirituality, and religion. Religion very often brings in a lot of social structure. Again, it may have been necessary at a time, otherwise the societies would have collapsed. So we might likely find that the successful societies merged truth, spirituality, what I call truth, with social instructions. Ideas like justice and scales of justice and an eye for an eye and all these kinds of things to just keep society functioning. But ultimately, this has nothing to do with spirit and spirituality. Okay? So when someone has the intention to hurt another, they are really hurting themselves inside. And so this is the key of this teaching for you as somebody on this path, is you don't want to hurt yourself. And that's what you're doing when you intend to hurt another. And so you really need to look at your actions and your words and why you do what you do. And you want to be very mindful of what is your intention. Now, what's interesting about this is if you manage to clear yourself out of evil intentions, evil, that might be a strong word, of, intentions to hurt somebody else or to make them feel, this includes things like making someone feel guilty, making someone feel ashamed. These are not things that we want to teach to other people. We really don't. These are forms of what's called emotional blackmail. So we don't want to teach people. We don't want to get people to do what's right by doing those things. And again, we have to question what's right. Do we really know? So if we're trying to shame our child into dressing a certain way, do we really know that it's wrong for them to dress how they're dressing? This has been a thing of children and parents probably as long as modern society has been around. Children find a way to dress in a way that challenges their parents' conceptions of what's right and wrong. It seems like it tends to be a part of growing up, at least in a Western culture, that many children will challenge their parents' ideas. Does it mean it's actually wrong? Did you have that when you were growing up, where your parents said, are you really going to wear that? Are you going to go out like that? They were embarrassed. They thought it was wrong. You thought it was cool, right? So again, we really want to be careful about assuming we know right or wrong for someone. And so again, using things like guilt and shame, fear is another one. This is a big one. And if you're a parent, it's probably been difficult for you not to use fear as a way to motivate your child to make certain choices or do certain things that you felt was the right thing to do. A much better approach is simply to educate, and then you allow others to make their choice. Now, again, I understand that if you have young children, they may not be able to understand certain concepts or certain ideas. They may not be ready for them. But you might be surprised. You might be surprised if you gave them the benefit of the doubt. Ultimately, the true nature in a child is not different than our true nature. This is true of all things. So it's true of human children, it's true of dogs, it's true of tigers, it's true of trees, rocks, stones, the planet Earth, the universe. The nature of all of these things is not different from our own nature. Now, this doesn't mean that if we encounter a tiger in the woods that it's not going to eat us, it's not going to attack us and try and devour us. Okay? Because even though the tiger's true nature is the same as our true nature, the tiger on a physical level, its nature is to, maybe if it's hungry, to eat a human being. And again, we as human beings might feel like, oh, that's bad. But is a tiger evil for acting on its animal nature, the nature of its form? even though its true nature, its ultimate nature, is again not any different than yours. In Buddhism, this is called Buddha nature. Is it wrong for a tiger to eat? It's not personal, right? It's not saying, oh, this person has dreams and aspirations and I'm going to cut that short by having dinner. I could eat anything else out here, but I'm going to eat this person because I'm evil. And that's not how it works. It's not personal. And this is also true of other people. When someone feels that they need to attack us, and again, you won't know. Don't assume you know. Okay? If you can, give that person the benefit of the doubt. And again, this is a very difficult practice. It's a very advanced practice. But even if someone is attacking us, again, they know not what they do. And it's not necessarily that they are evil or bad. And they don't know you. And they ultimately aren't attacking you. Again, if they're on the attack like that, if they're attacking the other, then they don't really understand the nature of reality. So basically you can chalk it all up to confusion, which again returns us to they know not what they do. They think that there's an other out there that they can attack. There isn't this playfulness that enlightened people have, where when we awake, we really are just basically playing a game. It's like a play. There are other people playing their part. There are tigers playing their part. There's all of this stuff. Rocks are pretending to be rocks. Tables are pretending to be tables. But it's all the same true nature. It's all ultimately contained within the self and is nothing other than the self. And so we can enjoy the play. We can have fun with forms. We can enjoy this, and without feeling that our fundamental nature will be lost or is threatened. Yes, the form may very much be threatened, and the form may die. This is, again, just the nature of form. Well, I'll say this, the form is going to die. That is an absolute, I can promise you that. Okay? So we all know how the story ends. This form dissolves. It goes back into the ground where it came from in one form or shape or another. You might burn it, cremate it, you might do whatever, but it's going away. Okay? So again, intention. What's most important for you? Okay, I talked a bit about other people's intention, but what's most important for you is your intention. And ultimately, the intention that you want to cultivate and you want to have toward all things and all beings is love. Now again, this may not mean you don't ever lose your temper. There may be times when love is fierce. Okay, again, I want to be very careful about putting that out there, because a lot of people, their ego will justify triggers as, oh, well, I'm just, teaching love by being violent and angry, and no. Okay? But in my experience, spirit can move in a very passionate, forceful, what may seem violent way. There are many Zen stories where the Zen master is seemingly doing violence to one of their disciples, one of their followers, someone who comes to ask a question. There are stories where a student will ask something like, what is the way, or what is Zen? And then the teacher might hit them with a stick, or worse. So if we assume that the Zen master is enlightened, which is the point of these stories. There's no point in reading about or studying or emulating someone who isn't enlightened. Then we have to assume that this kind of action is something that spirit can express as in the world. And to be honest with you, it doesn't take us very much to look out into the natural world and see that animals eat one another, animals eat plants, plants are living things. I know some people think that they somehow get around this idea of non-violence or ahimsa in yoga by becoming vegan or vegetarian, but I don't see it that way. Plants are alive. Plants are alive. And people will say, well, a cow has a higher level of consciousness than a plant, or whatever it is, that they will justify what they eat based on this idea that, well, this is a mammal and it's okay to eat fish, or it's okay to eat this or that. Everyone has their own idea. To me, none of this really holds water. You're eating a living thing. And then some people try and go to extremes and say, well, I'm going to eat only seeds or raw foods. And I've even heard stories of some people saying that they try and live off of sunlight. So humans really aren't designed to live off of sunlight. It's just not really how we're put together. So we are going to be sustaining our physical existence off of the physical existence of another being. And yes, I include plants in that. So this is just the way that this physical reality is set up. Now again, if we get too fixated on the physical reality, then it starts to seem very horrific and very heavy. We begin to feel drained and sapped and scared. So again, I gave another talk on this where I was talking about the movie analogy, where there has to be a balance, where we keep our awareness of our true nature. It's right there, right now, listening to this talk. Okay, there's nothing else listening to this talk but your true nature. Now, the thoughts and the ideas and the opinions and the memories that this talk elicits, that's different. That's not an essential part of your true nature. But remember, everything is ultimately an expression of your true nature as well. So again, it's like this wonderful play, this wonderful game that we are playing with ourselves. So in the Shaivite tradition, the Tantric Shaivite tradition, they like to say that Shiva hides himself in all things, all forms, so that he can experience the joy of rediscovering his true nature, himself, in all these things. And I love that. I think that's a great way of looking at what's going on. We are that essential nature at our core. And when we realize that, it's very liberating, and it brings a lot of joy and peace into our life. And so that idea that Shiva wakes up to his true nature and he experiences that, that is the experience of someone waking up to their Buddha nature or Christ consciousness, this awareness. But as I have covered in other talks, we again shouldn't lose sight of our humanity. And I think this is something that happened in spiritual traditions in the past. It happened a lot. And very often, I think, in the past, one had to almost leave society in order to have that kind of profound experience. But spirituality on this planet is changing from everything that I can see. course, I wasn't around thousands of years ago, so I can't really comment. But it seems like we're in a very different phase of spirituality on this planet. Many people are waking up to their true nature, some partly and others completely. And it's happening to people who even aren't interested in spirituality, and they don't even know what's happening to them. And so this is a time where I sense that what wants to happen now for humans is Spirit wants to wake up within humanity, and start to embody the human experience. Not to reject it, not to get away from it, which is a lot of what happened in the past. People, again, when they woke up to their true nature, they very often said, this is disgusting, this sort of human thing. And they would spend their life in meditation, essentially. They'd wake up long enough to sleep and maybe eat some food, if that. There are stories of people who would go into meditation and not come out for years and years and years. And I don't know if those are true or not, but might be. So again, this is a sort of, this isn't real and this is not important and not good. And I think where Spirit is now and where it's wanting to go is to live in your life. And it wants your life to be an awakened life. The very life that you're living, your job, your kids, your household, you fighting traffic in the morning. So how does Spirit, how does awakeness move there? And a very important part of that, again, is intention. Because Spirit is in love. It's in love with itself, and it's in love with creation. It's even in love with, you could say, the ego and confusion. And this is another thing I encounter in spiritual communities, even spiritual teachers, people who claim to be teachers, is they will talk about the ego as though it's evil and it's bad and we need to fight against it. And there may even be talks where it sounds like I'm saying that. And there's a reason for that. But even the ego is ultimately expression of our true nature. It comes from the nature of mind and awareness. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And in a sense, you could say it doesn't exist. It's a kind of confusion. So again, I know this is getting really, really complicated in a sense. I'm saying it exists, but it doesn't exist. So this is the nature of the work that I do. It is confusing, and I hope it isn't too confusing for you. The main thing I want you to take from today's talk is, again, others, we can't really know their intention. We can't. We cannot really know their intention. So we want to assume the best. In instances where it feels like, you know what, this person is just, it really seems like they're trying to hurt me, right? Then we want to elicit Jesus's teaching of forgive them for they know not what they do. They're actually harming themselves more than they're harming you, okay? And again, I'm talking spiritually. So physically, yeah, there can be a lot of damage there, and you want to try and minimize that. But again, when we bring in guilt and shame and blame and needing apologies and things like this, this is where we're starting to create our own suffering from that, okay? And then the most important thing is our intention. My advice for you is go out into the world and intend to love everyone and everything. This will require a change in your perception. It will require a change in the way you see the world. It will require a change in the types of snap judgments that you make about things. This is a lifelong practice. if not lifetimes of practice, okay? So this isn't something like one and done. Oh, I went on the retreat and I had this experience, or oh, I meditated and then I woke up and now I'm done. It's not like that. This is a practice of refining our perception over time to align our perception with the way that Spirit sees things. And again, I told you already, Spirit is in love. If I'm going to put it in theistic terms, God is in love. God so loved the world that he gave it his Son, his creation. That's what you are. Now, if you don't like theistic terms, you don't like those times, that's fine. You don't have to look at it in that way, but it may be helpful for certain people. Okay? When we begin to change how we see others, and we see the world, and we see ourselves as well, a lot of this starts with us, because a lot of us have a lot of self-hate. And we learn this from other people. Other people didn't know how to love themselves, and so they didn't know how to love us. And so they taught us basically what they had learned, which is self-loathing, that we aren't okay as we are. We need to be very afraid of certain things, or else we're going to get hurt. We need to guard against others and guard our heart. And this is the place where most people are. They have a lot of trauma, they have a lot of armor, and they have a lot of self-loathing, ultimately. And so these are things that we can heal on the spiritual path. I wish that these talks would be enough to help you do that. I don't think they are. And so this is where, working on a deeper level, I do several different things: one-on-one sessions working with people, guided meditations like Yoga Nidra. We can have shifts and changes in that practice. Zen meditation is something you can do on your own. That is very powerful. And also the Kundalini work that I do with students on retreat. We're not doing that right now because of COVID, but hopefully within the next 6 months or year or 2 years, we'll be in a place where we can begin doing that. And that's another way we can begin to work on these things. So again, our true nature is clear. Again, my experience is that something like anger actually can be part of that and can arise, but then it dissipates. It doesn't get stuck. And this is, again, notice your own consciousness for this. Do you get angry and then require an apology, or require someone to admit that they were wrong or that they had done something that they shouldn't do? Are you trying to get them to change to avoid your trigger? Okay, we can't do that. The world is not going to adapt to our triggers. So it's simply a failing. It's a way to frustrate yourself and to upset other people around you, because they're just being them. Most of the time, people are not intending to hurt us. Most of the time, we're not on the radar. They're much more concerned about themselves. And so we can feel affronted, we can feel slighted, we can feel that they should be aware of our feelings, but it's just never going to happen. Okay, it's not going to happen for most people. The way we're put together in form is we're at the center. We're at the center. And so again, with awakening and enlightenment, that begins to change and shift to some degree. But you definitely still are having a perspective and experiencing through a form. And that doesn't change. And so can only be so much concern and awareness of an individual egoic perspective. And generally, people who wake up aren't that concerned with placating people's egoic triggers and things like that. Very often, an enlightened person, an awake person, might even come across as being insensitive, because other people might try and tiptoe around our ego, and they're not going to do that. They're not interested in reinforcing those sorts of ideas. So anyway, everyone, I hope you got something from this, as always. And again, the most important thing is your intention. And I hope you will go out into the world with the intention to love it as it is. Begin with you to love yourself as you are. This isn't the same thing as justifying your behavior or asking other people to love you as you are. No, right? So sometimes people they'll go on this journey of self-love, and then they expect other people to appreciate them as they are. No, they're not going to. I'll tell you right now, I'll save you the time. That's not their job. That's your job. Your job is to fall in love with this form and this mind and all of this stuff. Don't expect other people to do it. That's your job. So you fall in love, okay? And it doesn't mean you can't change it, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't change it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't grow. Absolutely. But fall in love. Have compassion for this individual. And then when you really do that, when spirit falls in love, and I'm not talking about your individual soul, I'm talking about spirit. Okay, when spirit falls in love with this individual, then from there, that has the tendency to expand outward to all things and all beings, because we realize that this is no different than anything else. So what I call my hand is not really essentially different than the camera that I'm speaking into. There's a certain level of intimacy here, but there's also a different level of intimacy there. It doesn't mean it isn't part of what I am and contained within my true nature, and essentially a part of my true nature. So all right, everybody. Thanks again to my patrons and everyone who makes these talks possible. I'm very grateful. These are difficult times for yoga teachers like myself. I'm finding it's a very difficult time. So it is a struggle financially, it's a struggle professionally. So your support really means a lot to me. And of course, support goes two ways. So if you are struggling with something, a spiritual question, processing certain feelings or emotions, you have a spiritual or yoga related question, please reach out and I would love to be of service to you. Until next time, namaste and have a great day.